From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your neighbor, your host, David Gornoski. Happy to be with you once again in Central Florida and around the world. Glad to have all of our friends and neighbors together to learn, to grow, to unmask and unpack fake news, and to empower us with true news, which is that you don't have to rely on groupthink. You don't have to rely on what so-called settled science wants you to believe. Think for yourself, love your enemy, get on with your life, enjoy the fresh air of freedom. Together, we breathe it in every day, as is our birthright of being a human being made in this wonderful world that we live in. As dark as it can be, there's so much beauty out there for us to look at. And so we like to talk about science. We like to talk about innovation and things going on in nuclear energy and all kinds of inventions that can help make our lives better with win-win solutions that don't require subsidies and massive handouts to afford. But every now and then we also talk about the problem, and the problem, of course, is politics. The problem, of course, is tribalism. It's empathy-free shame games and blame games. That's politics. And one of the things that's at the heart of politics is the justice system and how it is used so often in wrong and abusive ways. There's great people, of course, in the justice system, but there's a lot of abuse that goes on. And I think two of the stories that I think are indicative for everybody to pay attention to the problems with criminal justice and the need for significant reform is the area of the Russiagate story and the related Flynn case that has been unraveling. And so here to unpack what we need to know about the facts is an attorney in Tampa Bay. He's a friend of the program, Morgan Streetman. How you doing?
Hey, David. Very good. Thank you for having me on today.
And it's great to hear from you. So I know that you have your own program and radio, and it's in the Tampa Bay area. Tell us a little bit about that first, because that's where I was listening to some
really
of
creative with the title, so we decided we'd call it the Morgan Streetman Show, just so everybody would know what it was all about.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that for almost 5 years now, talking politics, current events, as well as, and not just the fine points of the issues, but also trying to talk about broad principles, which I know is something that you do a lot on your program, and I listen to your program, and I love the way that you back to our first principles and why that's so important when we're constructing our belief systems and our positions on different issues, that we have some governing principles to work from, and we don't just go on an issue-by-issue basis and decide what sounds good in the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And if you don't have principles, if you're a society ruled by policies with no principles, then you're a society that's lawless and chaotic, and it becomes very difficult to have any semblance of boundaries and respect and mutual solidarity, you know?
Right. And that's one of the most important principles that we have in this country. It's kind of become a byword, and I don't know that people really understand what it means, and that is the rule of law. And the rule of law is so important, and it plays right into the story that you're talking about, the rule by the Justice Department, where they're making up the procedures that they want to follow as they go along. They're reinterpreting criminal statutes. They're reinterpreting the way that they can do things in a way that's not been done before, that's not acceptable. But the rule of law is so important that we, as citizens, can look at the law. Each of us has the ability to read the law ourselves and know how to conform our own conduct to the law. So the law has to be clear and understandable by an individual so that you can know how you can avoid being a lawbreaker. And that's fundamental. And that's why we have a written Constitution and written laws, as opposed to the rule of man, where perhaps the king or whoever else puts themselves in charge makes up the law as they go along on a case-by-case basis. And you're never quite sure if you're going to be able to survive your encounter with the king, because you might say the wrong thing, and it might be time for you to be executed because you said the wrong thing in front of the king. And so you have to worry about that. And so we don't want that in our country. We want every individual to be able to know that they are not breaking the law and to be able to constrain their conduct to a written law.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That plays right into the Flynn case when you look at the way that General Flynn was investigated and subsequently the way that he was prosecuted, and now the way that, the attempt by the Justice Department to dismiss the charges against him, even though, yes, he has pleaded guilty to them, but the attempt to dismiss it is not being handled in the usual fashion with deference to what the existing case law says is supposed to happen in these situations. So what you can see is start to finish, they didn't constrain their conduct, and this conduct goes right to the top. And it's a great time to be talking about this story because there's
I think we have a signal issue here. Morgan, are you there? So I think we're going to try to reconnect with Morgan Streetman. He's an attorney, and he's going to help us understand what's going on in the General Flynn case and the actions of the Judge Sullivan, who's involved in the case. I think we had a little signal drop, but we're going to try to reconnect with him because this is so important. What he's talking about, the rule of law, it has to be based on skin in the game. It has to be something discernible where the rules apply to everyone. You can't just have something where it's willy-nilly based on might makes right, based on as we go, do as we say, not as we do. That's not the basis of a just and orderly society, a society that's free. And so that's one of the things we have to be concerned about in this case with the General Flynn story. So Morgan Streetman, you're an attorney. You've looked at the Judge Sullivan story here with General Flynn. Help us make sense of what's going on. He's refused. He wants another judge to look at the case?
Right. Well, you're exactly right. He's appointed another judge to come in as what's called amicus curiae, or friend of the court. And he's essentially asked this judge to come in, it's a former judge, to come in and argue the other side of the case. We've got a couple of problems here right off the bat, though. First of all, there's no place for an amicus curiae in a criminal case. This is not a public matter. It is in one way a public matter, but it's not a matter of public concern, and it is fundamental that criminal cases are not supposed to involve briefing by parties who are not involved. So you don't just let anybody come in and brief and file things in a criminal case. In this case, he's appointed a judge to do it and to try and argue against the Department of Justice's motion to dismiss the charges. So what you've got is you've got a plaintiff, the Department of Justice, the United States of America, and you've got a defendant, which is General Flynn. And both of those parties are in full agreement that the case should be dismissed. And now the judge is going to say, well, wait a minute, let's have a third party. Let's have a third party involved in this, but who is the third party and what is their interest in the case? And Judge Sullivan is saying, well, I'm going to appoint a judge to come in and represent this third point of view, which is essentially the judge's point of view. This is completely improper for the judge to be doing this. And essentially the judge is inserting himself into the case. And he's also saying, and by the way, amicus, my friend, I want you to come in and I want you to give me an evaluation of whether or not General Flynn committed perjury. Now, General Flynn was never charged with committing perjury. So now the court is essentially stepping into the role of the prosecutor and saying, oh, I think I've found another crime that General Flynn may be guilty of, and I want to have a full briefing on that, and why shouldn't we charge him with that? Well, Judge, because that's not your role in this controversy. And the Supreme Court just ruled on this again, and this is long-standing precedent. Courts are supposed to decide the cases as they are presented to the court. courts are not supposed to go out and say, well, you presented the argument in one way, but we really think that a better argument is to look at it in another way, or to be focused on a different set of concerns than what you brought to us. So we're going to kind of take your case away from you, and we're going to re-engineer it to what we think it should be. That's not what judges are supposed to do. That's not what courts are supposed to do. This is sort of fundamental to our system because it involves the separation of powers. So judges are supposed to exercise their judgment, and the courts are supposed to exercise their judgment over the cases as they're presented to the court. So by Judge Sullivan inserting himself and saying, hey, guys, U.S. Department of Justice, United States of America, and General Flynn, who's very ably represented by Sidney Powell, you guys have missed something, and I want something else looked into here other than what you have brought before me. That's improper. So just on its face right there, the judge is doing something that is not in the proper way, and it is not the way that it is normally done. It's not the way that it's allowed to be done. The judge in this kind of a case, the court really, is performing a function. So once the prosecution says that they want to drop the charges, the court's only function is to drop the charges. Now, in certain unique circumstances, a court has the ability to object to this, but let me tell you what those circumstances are. That is where a prosecution has repeatedly filed and dropped charges as some form of harassment of a defendant. Then a court can step in and say, no, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep filing and dropping and refiling. That is when the court can appropriately step in and address the issue. But what we've got here is a totally different scenario. What we've got here is an agreement between the prosecution and the defense that this case ought to be dropped because there was misbehavior by the FBI throughout the process. And we know about this. We've known about this for over 2 years now. This has been covered in the media. It's not trumpeted from the rooftops. It's not. They don't talk about it on CNN hundreds of times a day like they do the stories that aren't true. But you can go out there and you can find this information, and there have been investigations done on this entire process from start to finish on General Flynn, and everything that we suspected was going on is now being proved to be going on because documents that are not redacted are being released.
We're talking with...
So we're seeing documents like the unredacted Susan Rice email, February 20th of 2017.
We're talking with attorney. We're talking with attorney Morgan Streetman, who's a Tampa attorney. Visit morganstreetmedia.com to see his content. We'll continue with Morgan Streetman in just a moment as we unpack more about the implications of the Flynn case. Stay with us.
A lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania and Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
The one thing that we've learned from an epidemic is that if we are healthy, we are far less likely to be susceptible to grave sickness. With that stated, stem cell activation is a big part of keeping ourselves healthy. By activating your own stem cells, you'll experience energy, better sleep, reduction in pain, and a support system that supports faster healing from wounds. LifeWave X39 patches are an easy, cost-affordable way to activate stem cells. Clinical studies demonstrate that LifeWave patches reset the genes in the body to a younger, healthier state. By wearing the daily patch, your body will activate the stem cells to give you benefits of a better way of living a healthy, productive life. Go to lifewave.com/B radio to see how you can elevate, activate, and regenerate your life with stem cell therapy. There's a special offer now with B Radio. The address again is lifewave.com/B radio. Live healthier and wiser with the X39 LifeWave patches at lifewave.com/B radio.
If you know anything about NFL or about NCAA basketball or football or NHL or whatever, entertainment television, make sure you make a deposit at betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Again, make a deposit. They've been getting a lot of great response from the Bubba Army. Make your deposit using promo code Bubba100. It's simple. Go to betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Sign up with the Bubba100 code and make that deposit and get your bonus, plus have some fun at the safest wagering site available. Fast, on-time paying their winnings out, incredibly mobile-friendly. And if you haven't already signed up, then go now. Make your deposit at betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Bubba100 gets you a special bonus and gets you in the game. Again, www.betdsi.com, and at the promo code portion,
Bubba100.
Bubba100. Thank you.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski here with attorney Morgan Streetman here in Tampa Bay. He practices, and his website's morganstreetmedia.com, where he has his own podcast and radio programs and other interesting content you need to take a look at. And I'm going to Morgan because Morgan understands the law as an attorney, and he's able to give us insights that you don't hear in the New York Times, that illustrious paper. You don't hear the good old-fashioned rule of law explained, do you, Morgan?
That's right. You can't look for it in places like that because they don't want you to think that way. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to understand the principles. Because if you understand the principles, you might object to some of their policies.
Interesting. That's what it's all about. It's all about, and they want to play a pro wrestling game where there's designated baby faces and there's designated heels, good guys and bad guys, and they want Trump and his team, whether we like him or not, to be the designated bad guys that we're supposed to boo. Now, they always allow the uncool crowd to cheer on the bad guy. Yeah. You can have the uncool, deplorable, the hinterland people. We'll let them be the base for the bad guys. But there is a designated narrative here that only a fool couldn't see it. You know what I mean? That obviously the status quo continues on no matter which team's in power, but the media, 90% of it is locked up on basically there's a designated good guy and there's a designated bad guy. And every now and then the designated bad guys win, and all of our media is going to make you feel like they're the worst thing that's ever happened to you,
Well, and it's largely a distraction to keep people unempowered.
Right.
You've got the main show every night, and then, if you happen to go to the bar after the show, you'll see the hero and the heel are there at the bar drinking together, and they're enjoying the fact that you paid for their drinks.
Yeah. Yeah, we're paying a lot of drinks right now, trillions of dollars going out to everybody during this time of fear. But let's go back to the Flynn story because I think it's important. I don't hear anybody talking like you're saying. Let's shift. We can go back to something else there if you want. But what about this story that's come out with Bill Barr saying, no, we don't have any indication that Biden or Obama were involved in criminal activity in this Flynn case. Is that, obviously there's a political component to him saying that. He's trying to have an olive branch to say, no, we're not going to go there. But from a legal standpoint, is there anything to this unmasking? And if Biden and Obama deliberately ordered this to try to destroy the incoming administration, is that a crime? Or is that, as Barr said, some things are corrupt, but they're not criminal?
Well, that's a great question. I think it clearly is a crime. It's a conspiracy to misuse and fraudulently. They knew right off the bat, before Director Comey ever briefed President Trump or President-elect Trump. Remember, that happened early in January of 2017. He briefed him on the dossier. I think it was January 6th or 7th, sometime right in that time frame. And he came and he told him, and if you go back and listen to Director Comey's interviews, he says that they knew this was a salacious and unverified dossier. So they knew from the beginning. And, of course, if you dig into all the little details on the FBI notes, they knew how the dossier was constructed. First of all, it was bought and paid for 50-50, we now know, by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. And we're talking about the Steele dossier, which is the complete basis of all of these FISA warrants. But they weren't just putting all their eggs in one basket. They weren't just going after Carter Page. They were also going after George Papadopoulos. And now what we're coming to learn is they were also looking into General Flynn in various different ways and for various different reasons. And we don't know what they were necessarily. They could well have been pretextual. We know the stuff that happened involving his phone calls to Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. Those occurred, we know for sure, on December 29th of 2016. But if you look at the unmasking requests, which have now been released, and this is within the last couple of weeks that these unmasking requests have finally been made public, thanks to Ambassador Rick Grinnell's hard work as acting Director of National Intelligence, you look at those requests, they go back to November 30th of 2016. The first request was November 30th by Samantha Power, the ambassador to the United Nations. Now, I don't know why she was making a request to have General Flynn unmasked in some of these intercepts, but, they were obviously trying to look into him well before these telephone calls. And remember, the telephone calls are the whole basis for the investigation and ultimately the indictment.
It's fascinating, and I think there's a lot more here. When we continue, I want to ask Attorney Morgan Streetman, who's here with us, how does this relate to reports that Senator Rand Paul made a few years ago that John Brennan and others were surveilling him, another rival to the Obama administration and their Hillary Clinton friends? How does that potentially tie into this? And are they going to accuse Rand Paul of trying to build a hotel in Moscow too? Let's continue in just a moment as we unpack more fake news and more fake justice, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
Special report, coronavirus update. Vice President Mike Pence is visiting Central Florida as the region's biggest tourist destination starts to reopen. Pence traveled to the state to drop off protective equipment at a nursing home and meet with tourism officials and the governor. In a photo op at a burger joint, neither Pence or Florida's governor were wearing a face covering. President Trump threatened to hold up federal funds for the battleground states of Michigan and Nevada as they're seeking to allow voting by mail due to the pandemic. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany addressed Trump's worries.
This is a concern. The president's right to look at this. We want a free and fair election, and that's his concern.
French President Emmanuel Macron said he's open to traveling to the U.S. for an in-person meeting with a group of 7 leaders if the pandemic allows. After canceling the in-person summit back in March, President Trump now says everyone coming in for the meeting would be yet another sign of a return to normalcy. I'm Barbara Cusack.
This is good news, maybe exactly when you need it to. Right now, MediShare is waiving their new member fees. This could save you money on top of all that you'll save each month by becoming a member of MediShare. So many people are looking for a healthcare solution right now, seeing the cost of COBRA plans, for instance, and MediShare is the affordable alternative to health insurance. The typical family saves $500 a month. You might save even more. MediShare is a Christian community that shares each other's healthcare costs, and because of the current economic situation, they're making it easier than ever. Apply by May 30th, and you can save an additional $170 on your first month. I'll give you the number here in a second, and if you call, you can get a price within 2 minutes. Just tell them the promo code SHARE to receive your additional savings. Maybe now is the time to make the switch like more than 400,000 people already have and start saving. Here it is. Call 844-91-BIBLE. That's 844-91-BIBLE. 844-91-BIBLE.
In a fight for the soul of human civilization itself, a neighbor's choice is back. I'm David Gornoski. We're live, and we're unpacking the Flynn case and looking at the implications for the rule of law, the rule of justice, and the rule of a society that can be bound together by an intelligible law. That's important here. Law should be based in skin in the game, in my opinion. It should be based in what's good for everyone is good for the rulers too, or the favored party. And it's only the tyrannical cases in history in which that is abandoned, which is unfortunately most of history. And joining me to discuss this Flynn case and some of the other related issues with it, including Russiagate, is Tampa attorney Morgan Streetman. So Morgan, I wanted to pick up where we left off. What about this story that Rand Paul was talking about in the media a lot in regards to Brennan, the director of the CIA at the time under Obama? Perhaps he was, according to Rand Paul, surveilling him. Does Rand Paul have a Moscow hotel that CNN's going to report on soon?
Well, and how much innuendo can they throw up against the wall, right? I mean, that's what they do. If you stand up to them, and Rand Paul has been one of the few people who has tried to stand up to the intelligence community, this horrible politicization of our intelligence community and the weaponization of the full power of the federal government against the political campaign. And we know this kind of weaponization of our intelligence for political purposes has been going on. This didn't start with the investigations into candidate Trump that we know about that supposedly officially started in July of 2016, Operation Crossfire Hurricane. Well, we know it started before that because there's already evidence in the public record of that. But it wasn't just candidate Trump that they were investigating. They were abusing the system, and they were investigating, and we don't know exactly who, but we can assume because we know the numbers. We know the raw numbers. It was thousands and tens of thousands of improper searches being done against U.S. citizens. So take your guess. It's probably against their political enemies for political purposes, and they were building dossiers. Now, this was going on during the Obama administration back into the years 2012. So this was going on for the entire second half of the Obama administration. We know that for a fact. Thousands, tens of thousands of illegal, warrantless searches into private communications of American citizens. So we can only imagine that Rand Paul would have been swept up in this. And we, in fact, know that he early on made himself an enemy to the deep state, to the intelligence apparatus, the military-industrial complex. It has many different names, and probably none of them do it full justice. But the point is that there are big moneyed interests and corporate interests that exist and that feed off of our government. and they feed off of a huge federal government. So in their interest, the federal government should be as big as possible and control as many things as possible, because that means as much money as possible will flow from the citizens, the people who actually create value in this country, up to Washington and be siphoned off by these big companies, these big defense contractors. I was just looking, I don't know if you remember, but you remember when John McCain was on the floor of the Senate saying that Rand Paul was somehow working for Vladimir Putin. So that's their standard playbook. If you don't agree with them, you must be with the Russians.
Right, yeah, and that's it's same old bigotry. They love to use that word bigotry in the politically correct media, groupthink. But there's nothing more bigoted than disparaging people as an enemy of the state when they don't want to kill people overseas. You know, and that's what you're doing. Right. When you go to unconstitutional wars and drone strikes and sanctions, and you want to stop that, you're trying to save innocent lives. And for that, the nasty, shrill bigotry is just spewing forth, usually from a bipartisan standpoint and a bipartisan media standpoint as well. So, that's one of the things that I fight back against when people want to say, oh, Trump is such a monster because of his ugly speech. I say, you know what? Look, I wouldn't talk the way he does. That's not my style, really. You know, I have a different way of doing that. But you know what? I'll take ugly speech over one extra bomb blowing up someone innocent overseas than I'll take that any days. I'll take profane speech with a less than one less bomb. You see what I mean? So I don't want bombs. I'll take ugly speech over extra bombs and extra wars any day. But it seems decision making, they love perpetual war. They wanted to sell us on a bogus basis for the Syrian war. That fell on its face. They wanted us to, ratchet up aggression in all kinds of conflicts, to not make peace or talk to North Korea. So they like their scapegoats to stay scapegoats. They don't want to normalize anything with the designated.
Today, it will inform you that the issues that we're talking about, the financial interests that are behind the concept of perpetual war, they've been with us for a long time, because war is big money, and there's not a lot of accounting in war. And so it is a very profitable endeavor for the companies that make the war materiel, the uniforms, the bombs, the guns, planes, the ships. All of that is extremely profitable in a wartime. We've all heard the story about the $500 hammer that the Pentagon bought, right?
Right.
I mean, there's about $498 of profit in that hammer, and so that's why these companies like a war environment, because there's not a lot of checks on their profit margins, what they can charge and what they can get away with.
That's why the media, as an aside, they love to give favorable, glowing coverage of drugs that are approved by the FDA that are patented. They don't like natural things. They don't like things that are generics like hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. They give wall-to-wall negative media coverage of anything that's off patent or natural, because there's no obscene profit margins, just like there's no obscene profit margins for the military, industrial, corporate hammers and toothbrushes that are sold for perpetual war overseas.
Right. So when you start to look at this stuff, and it can almost overwhelm you with a little bit of concern that our system, sort of entraps us into this system. But you can break free of it, because we still do have a little bit of freedom in this country, and we can still control what goes on inside of our own heads, the freedom of thought about things from a perspective that I don't hear a lot of people, coming from, and I think it's fantastic. I love hearing your program because of that. And that's what we need. We need people to be willing to step outside of the controlled narrative and take a different position from what the media is trying to tell us. The propagandists are trying to tell us are our options.
Yeah, I agree, and that we got to open up a dialogue that will transform the frame of what you're allowed to think and believe in, and it takes courage to do that, because you get a lot of flack. But that's the name of the game. It's always been that way. Freedom has always been a small minority interest that has to overcome the malaise of apathy from the general population in most places. I want to switch to something that, again, will help us unpack this principle of freedom and truth-telling in media and justice, and that's the Russiagate story, because that is totally been blown out of the water with the recent revelations of Rich Grinnell. So first, let's start back at the beginning. I want to play a clip from the Google CEO about, or is it Facebook or Google? It's all. I think it's Google.
It's the Google.
Yeah, let's play this clip from the Google CEO when he was testifying. We have that clip. Okay, we'll have to wait on that then. So, let's start with the foundation of what has come out recently.
Now,
okay, here we go. Do we have the clip?
Now, according to media reports, Google found evidence that Russian agents spent thousands of dollars to purchase ads on its advertising platforms that span multiple Google products as part of the Russian agents' campaign to interfere in the election 2 years ago. Additionally, Juniper Downs, head of global policy for YouTube, testified in July that YouTube had identified and shut down multiple channels containing thousands of videos associated with the Russian misinformation campaign. Does Google now know the full extent to which its online platforms were exploited by Russian actors in the election 2 years ago?
We have, we undertook a very thorough investigation, and in 2016, we now know that there were two main ad accounts linked to Russia, which advertised on Google for about $4,700 in advertising. We also found other limited...
Total of $4,700?
That's right. Which was, no amount is okay here, but, we found limited activity, improper activity. We have learned a lot from that, and we've, dramatically increased the protections we have around our election offerings. Leading up to current elections, we again found limited activity, both from the Internet Research Agency in Russia, as well as accounts linked to Iran.
So, Morgan, as we can see there's a massive amount of spending that they were able to find. $4,700, that's about equivalent to what an average donut shop might spend in the Tampa Bay area for their donuts on YouTube.
Exactly. It's a joke. I mean, we've been told for years. Now this testimony was public, so this has been out there. And, of course, you hear Jerry Nadler, Congressman Nadler, is the one asking the questions. He was one of the lead prosecutors in the presidential impeachment. But they spent $4,700 on the Google platform in total to influence the election. If you look at the other places they spent money, the biggest spend was on Facebook, and they spent between $40,000 and $45,000 on Facebook. So all total, they spent about $50,000, it's alleged. And believe me, if there was any way to allege more than that, the government would have said that they had spent more than that. But that's all that actually occurred. Now, if you could sway the election for $50,000, I mean, think about how inept the Hillary Clinton campaign must have been, because they had tens of millions of dollars that they spent on media, and Donald Trump's campaign spent a good amount of money as well on social media, and yet the Russians can come in with their little Russian magic wand. They could spend less than $5,000, and all of a sudden the entire country's under their spell. I mean, it common sense tells you that's not what happened here.
Yeah. And yet that's what we lack in the media, that's what we lack in political discourse, is common sense. So with this Russiagate story, what happened with Grinnell's declassification of testimonies, which further destroys this whole narrative that Russia has been this giant boogeyman that has controlled and hacked the election? Half the country, God bless them, have been shivering with fevered dreams every night with this Cold War 2.0 hysteria that's straight out of a film or action adventure fantasy novel. What do you think of what's going on with Grinnell's revelations there?
Well, first of all, big picture, I think it's great. And I want to just say I think you're exactly right. But be careful, because if you question this narrative or doubt it in any way, that only just makes you a Russian agent, just like Rand Paul, just like anybody who dares to question this narrative that's not even backed up by real facts. But what's interesting that's just been released is these 57 transcripts that were taken by the House Intelligence Committee. So these are sworn depositions taken of witnesses, and one of the witnesses was the CrowdStrike president, Sean Henry. Now, CrowdStrike, you got to remember the whole Russian hacking mythology has two major points to it. One is that the Russians flooded social media with a bunch of memes, and that changed people's minds, and that's what we've just been talking about. The other piece of it that they claim is that Russia hacked the DNC servers, stole a bunch of emails, gave them to WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks published them, and that hurt the Hillary Clinton campaign. So that's the two pieces. So now when we flip over and we start talking about CrowdStrike, this is the company, by the way, Ukrainian-based company. Very interesting when you start to look in, and we really don't have time to get into all the details of the Ukraine's involvement, but Ukrainian-based company that was charged by the DNC and supposedly by the FBI with investigating what happened to the DNC servers. Now, the testimony of their president, who was the lead forensic investigator on this case, was just released. But this testimony was taken back in December of 2017. So Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler, all these people leading the charge against President Trump, they all knew about this years ago. But what came out is so interesting is that Sean Henry testifies that they did not have, and I'm quoting him now, we did not have concrete evidence that the data was exfiltrated from the DNC. Now, what that means is they don't have evidence that it ever left the servers. Because, as you probably know, I know you've had Bill Benny on before, who's one of the most famous NSA analysts of all time, probably the most decorated analyst in the history of the NSA. And Bill Benny looked into this, and it has to do with the transfer speeds on the documents themselves that were supposedly taken off the DNC server. And the basic idea is that if you took it off and put it onto a thumb drive, each file would load onto the thumb drive pretty quickly. So the numbers, the timestamps on the files themselves will be close together. But if you were to take this information and move it over the internet, that takes more time. So the timestamps on the files after you move them off the server over the internet, which is what's alleged to have happened with the Russian hacking, those timestamps would be further apart. And what Bill Benny's done is he's looked at it and he says the timestamps are consistent with the files being moved onto a thumb drive, which really points to what we call an inside job. So somebody at the DNC was unhappy with the situation, was unhappy with the fact that the Democrat National Committee didn't want to leave it up to democracy and decided that Hillary Clinton should be the nominee, not Bernie Sanders, and they decided they would do whatever they had to do to make that a reality. And that angered a young man, we believe, named Seth Rich. And I think this is pretty well established if you look at the evidence. And Seth Rich downloaded the files from the DNC server, and he gave them to WikiLeaks. And Julian Assange, before he got taken into Belmarsh, and we haven't heard from him in quite some time, Julian Assange so much almost said this exact thing on a television interview. So this is already pretty well known about. But like I said, CrowdStrike is coming out, and they're saying they had no evidence that the data was taken off the DNC server. They looked at everything. Normally, you would see a file transfer coming out of there. They say, quote, there are times we can see data exfiltrated, and we can say conclusively. But in this case, it appears it was set up to be exfiltrated, but we just don't have the evidence that says it actually left. So where's the crime? Where's the evidence that the Russians hacked the DNC server? Oh, it doesn't exist.
We're talking with Morgan Streetman. MorganStreetMedia.com is his website. He's an attorney. It's MorganStreetMedia.com. Welcome to A Neighbor's Choice, where we unpack fake news. I love it. It's great to see the truth coming out, Morgan. Let's continue in just a moment.
A lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania and Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania and Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Attorney spokeswoman. Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Lang, board-certified optometric physician and certified nutritional specialist, host of popular talk show Ask the Doctor. I've researched and developed an amazing new omega-3 product that you'll see incredible results with. It's called Fortify Super Omega-3 Max. I had one of the top Norwegian omega-3 research teams in conjunction with myself and Fortify Vitamins aid in the development of this advanced omega-3. This product is the most potent and purest triglyceride form omega-3 in the United States today. Omega-3 is great for all aspects of your health and well-being, especially in this unprecedented, challenging time. I am giving a 25% discount with promo code RADIO during this viral pandemic. Go to my website, fortify.com. That's FORTIFEYE. Remember the EYE in Fortify. That's fortify.com. Enter the promo code RADIO to receive the 25% discount.
Hey, it's Bubba the Love Sponge. With all the coronavirus stuff going on, you've heard the CDC say wash your hands about a zillion times. You know, studies show that the average person touches their face 23 times an hour. Your nose, eyes, and mouth, that's called the T-zone. And the T-zone is the most important area to keep clean. And for over 12 years, there's this product called TheraWorks Protect. It's been used by millions of emergency room patients and medical clinics to support infection prevention. TheraWorks Protect is easy to use, and it's safe to apply several times a day on your hands and around your nose and eyes and mouth, better known again as the T-zone. Just apply a small amount into your hand and rub it in until it dries, and then apply another amount and rub it all over your T-zone. You know, finding hand sanitizer sometimes can be difficult, and now you can order TheraWorks Protect online. Just get it directly from them. Go to TZoneProtect.com and use the Bubba Kicker. When you use the Bubba /, you're going to get 20% off and free freight, and you're going to have it in a few days. Again, TZoneProtect.com /Bubba. Start protecting yourself and the ones that you love now.
There's a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania and Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm here with Tampa attorney Morgan Streetman. You can visit his website, morganstreetmedia.com. Okay. Let's see if we can get our guest back. But we had Morgan Streetman on to talk about what's going on in the Russiagate story, the Flynn Gate story, Obama Gate. There's so many gates. It's the only thing we need is a tailgate party to sort it all out. It's just a circus. But that's what we can continue to expect on A Neighbor's Choice, is that we're going to go fearlessly and unmask the different, fake news stories that continue to gobble up all the attention by the groupthink media. We're going to continue to sort through the falsehoods and get to the bottom of things. So, Morgan Streetman, any final thoughts as we wrap up here about how we can protect the rule of law? I believe that one of the key things we need to do is fight for a sane left, and we need to amplify voices like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone, folks who don't want perpetual war. How about you? How can we get the left to get its sanity back and help us get our freedoms and peace?
Well, I think you're exactly right about those gentlemen. Aaron Mate has got some very good stuff on this as well. And I think we all need to try to stay educated. We need to not accept what the media tells us. We need to look into issues and try to apply our own common sense. This cannot be a world of specialists where only the scientists can tell us things and we have to just accept whatever they say. We've all got to be, as individuals, trying to look into these subjects ourselves and make up our own minds.
Well, I appreciate what you've done to shed light from a legal perspective on these scandals. They're a shameful disgrace. I'll just say it. They're a shameful disgrace on our country, and we got to get rid of this clown show once and for all and bring some sanity back. And it starts with neighborly conversations. It starts with making friends with those on the left and those independents who are saying, I don't want this banana republic. This is a hellscape. We don't want this. This is disgusting. We have to have integrity. We have to have freedom. We have to have our rights protected. No matter who you were siding with, you don't put people in cages for victimless, nonviolent crimes. You don't surveil your enemies. You just don't do it. So I appreciate Morgan Streetman, you coming on and giving your attorney perspective. And visit morganstreetmedia.com to learn more about what he's doing. I'm David Gornoski. Remember, we have an obligation to protect our minds from groupthink. And the best way to do that is to imitate the personhood revolution of Jesus. Godspeed.